Okay. Mazie? Good. All right, thank you all for coming, and I thank Senators Murray and Markey and Hirono. Well, today is an important anniversary. Exactly 105 years ago, Congress passed the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote for the first time. The 19th Amendment was one of the greatest leaps ever in our march to becoming a more perfect union, and was only possible from decades of sacrifice, of struggle, of persistence, a lot of which started in upstate New York, I'm proud to say. Of course, we honor the countless women who sacrificed, struggled, and persisted, but we're also reminded of the daunting but valiant fight ahead. I am wearing this yellow ribbon. It was given to me by the National Commission on Suffrage that allowed us to go downstairs and look at the original document, first time it showed in the Capitol. But it's in my pocket, not pinned on because the stem broke. Appropriate given what the Supreme Court has done to human rights and women's rights in the last few years. Okay, we're going to carry, so more than a century stands between this generation and the generation that made it possible for women to vote. But in many ways, we still share their struggle for greater justice and equality. We still carry the same moral duty they bore to make our nation a more faithful reflection of our founding ideals. The march for equality for women and for all Americans is certainly not over, as the broken stem indicates, and that is why we Senate Democrats are going to continue to fight for women's freedoms this week, including a vote on the right to contraception. When women are told by hard-right politicians that their health care decisions are not theirs to make, the march is still not over. On this 105th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, we must confront the ugly truth that women sadly have fewer freedoms than they did just a few years ago. So tomorrow, the Senate will defend the freedom of choice with a vote on the Right to Contraception Act led by Markey and Hirono. Federal protections for contraceptives are a critical piece of protecting women's reproductive freedoms. This legislation would codify the right to conception into federal law. As MAGA Republicans continue to block protections for access to contraceptives at the state level, there are several states where the legislature is in the process of doing that right now. It is vital we protect contraception at the federal level, prevent the states from doing this. To those who think that federal action protecting access to birth control is not vital, they are wrong. Republicans are openly blocking these protections in states across the country. And there's going to be more action to come. Last night, I began the Rule 14 process for the Right to IVF Act led by Senators Duckworth and Murray and Booker, to place it on the legislative calendar and make it available to consideration on the floor. I intend to bring this legislation protecting access to IVF up for a vote very soon. Millions of Americans have relied on IVF to have children, but after a stunningly radical decision by the Alabama Supreme Court that jeopardized access to IVF, families are rightfully worried that this option be stripped away. Go to any place in America and talk to women, and this is one of the things they're talking about. So Senate Democrats will act to safeguard and strengthen IVF access for all Americans so that everyone has the chance to start a family. In coming weeks, we will put reproductive freedoms and women's rights front and center before this chamber in hopes that we can do what we did 105 years ago, create a more perfect union. Senator Murray.
Well, earlier today I chaired a HELP committee hearing on the damage and cruelty that Republicans' anti-abortion policies have caused over the past 2 years since the Dobbs decision. The shockwaves from Republicans' war on abortion are not dying down. Rather, they are getting louder day by day. Because every day, another woman in this country learns the abortion that she needs is now hundreds of miles and thousands of dollars out of reach. Every day, another woman is confronted with the agonizing reality that she does not have control over her own body, that Republican politicians are forcing her to remain pregnant no matter what and denying her the reproductive care that she needs with sometimes dangerous and even fatal consequences. At our hearing today, we heard the reality of how the chaos and heartbreak caused by Republican abortion bans is growing day by day. And we saw how Republicans are still trying to deny the horrific realities that they have created. They're not just trying to ignore the harm they've done, they're continuing to peddle dangerous disinformation about abortion, push even more extreme attacks on reproductive rights, and pretend the most unhinged policies are somehow moderate, that the most unimaginable tragedies are somehow humane. The American people are not buying it. Women's experiences are too personal for Republicans to spin, and the record of the Republican Party is too clear for them to deny. Over half of House Republicans support fetal personhood becoming law of the land. That is at the extreme in the extreme. It would mean a nationwide ban on abortion, nationwide from conception. It would ban emergency contraception like Plan B. It would ban IUDs. You should ask Republicans what the heck women with IUDs right now are supposed to do. It would upend IVF access, as we saw in Alabama, and in some states it would make women who get abortions eligible for the death penalty. That is the policy that the majority of House Republicans have endorsed, including the Speaker. No one should write this off. No one should buy Republicans' attempts to downplay it. Everyone knows actions speak louder than words. Supporting that bill is an action, and it's a loud one. Well, another opportunity for action is coming up this week. Tomorrow, the Senate will vote on the Right to Contraception Act. The message here is a simple one. Do you support the right to contraception or not? The vast majority of Americans absolutely do, overwhelmingly. But what about Republicans? One of the Republican witnesses at our hearing this morning, someone Republicans chose to bring in to represent their arguments, is actively working to ban basic forms of contraception. That should tell you a lot. Senate Democrats believe every woman has a right to contraception, whether it's the pill or Plan B or an IUD. What could be more common sense and more uncomplicated? So tomorrow, every single Senate Republican will be put on the record about where they stand on access to contraception. You can bet the American people will be watching closely. And whatever the outcome, you can bet Democrats are going to keep fighting to restore abortion rights across our country and protect women's reproductive rights across the board. Thank you.
Mazie.
Thank you. We should all be asking, why do the Republicans have such an obsession about controlling women's bodies? So this month is almost 2 years since the disastrous Dobbs decision. And Dobbs wreaked chaos and havoc, but there is more to come. Justice Thomas called for revisiting Griswold, which is the 1965 case protecting the right to contraception. And he pointed to the desire to revisit Griswold in his concurrence to the Dobbs decision. Excuse me. Justice Alito respects his wife's right to, have a flag flying upside down, but he respects his wife's right to do that, apparently, but he doesn't give a rip about telling millions of women in this country that they have to have babies. I said, what's with that? And just this year, both of those justices suggested the Comstock Act, a Civil War-era law, could be used to restrict access to reproductive services in this country. Republican states across the country have been blocking or rolling back access to contraception. Virginia's governor just vetoed a right to contraception bill. Earlier this year, Arizona Republicans blocked a similar bill in their legislature. Oklahoma's legislature have advanced a bill that would ban access to IUDs and other emergency contraceptives, and the list goes on. This abuse of power and control and Republicans' obsessions with controlling women's body continues. And we should ask, why is that? So Democrats know women should make decisions about their own bodies. And for myself, one of the major reasons that I ran for office was my desire to make sure that women had access to abortion, and we did. For 50 years, I had a right, a constitutional right to abortion, which this out-of-control Supreme Court majority just summarily took away. So our bill, the Right to Contraception bill, is very simple. It says we have a right to contraception, and the providers of contraception have a right to provide that contraception. It would help ensure people across the healthcare dimension that we will have access to the contraceptions, including IUDs and other methods, Plan B, and more. It doesn't force anybody to use contraception. It doesn't force anybody to provide contraception, but it's certainly for those who want to have it, who want to allow it, who want to provide it, will not be stopped by either federal or state law to do that. And tomorrow there's going to be a vote on this bill, and my question is, will Republicans stand with the women and families in this country or not? Mahalo.
And batting cleanup, Senator Markey.
So thank you so much, and thank you to you, Leader Schumer, for bringing the Right to Contraception Act to a vote. I introduced the Contraception Act right after the Dobbs decision because it was clear that the Dobbs decision was just a preview of coming atrocities that were going to put additional women's rights on the chopping block. And while the Republicans blocked my attempts in 2022 and 2023 to actually have a vote on the Senate floor, Senator Schumer is using Rule 14 to ensure that every Republican will be put on record and the American people will understand where the Republican Party is on the right to access to contraception in 2024 in the United States of America. We will vote on this bill to put every member on record, whether they support the right for people to get contraception and the right for providers to give it in all 50 states. MAGA extremists have an anti-freedom, anti-rights agenda. They are offended by the idea that people can make decisions with their doctor to decide if birth control pills, an IUD, or Plan B works for them. They are offended by people having the dignity to make personal decisions without their involvement. This is the rule, not the exception, of MAGA extremism. Overturning Roe was never their goal. The Dobbs decision was just the beginning. The threat to contraception is not hypothetical. The threat to Americans' freedom was distilled by Justice Thomas's concurrence. Justice Thomas put the right to contraception in the crosshairs of this extremist Supreme Court. And just today, a Republican witness at the Help Committee hearing could not commit to whether she supports women's access to Plan B and IUDs. Republican governors in Virginia, Arizona, Tennessee, and Nevada vetoed state-level protections for the right to contraception. This is not theoretical. This is very real and has a very powerful impact on women, on families in our country right now. We must show the American people unequivocally who is willing to fight for Americans' health, for their freedom, for their equality. Republicans want to oppress, suppress, and repress. Democrats know that Republicans and Donald Trump stole seats on the Supreme Court in order to be able to create the Dobbs decision. And in the Thomas concurrence, he laid out where they're going in the future in terms of restricting the rights of Americans. MAGA extremists want to put themselves in the patient exam rooms, but can't stand letting people examine how extreme they truly are. That's what happened in 2022. That's what happened in 2023 when they blocked the vote. But tomorrow, they're all going to be put on record, every one of them. And in November, the American people will not forget how they vote.
Thank you, cleanup hitter. For the Boston, yes, Manu.
Are you supporting Senator Menendez's independent bid to run for a Senate seat in New Jersey?
Look, the primary is today. I'm not even going to comment at this point.
Leader Schumer, do you think the Democrats have a problem with the southern border and messaging ahead of 2024? I mean, Republicans have said that this is basically a charade by the Biden administration, this executive action.
Look, the bottom line is that we all know what happened. Democrats supported a strong bipartisan bill. Republicans initially said this is a very strong, good bill. And then they turned around 180 degrees when Donald Trump was very explicit. He wanted the bill to fail to create chaos at the borders. Our preference is to have the Republicans join with us and support a strong bipartisan piece of legislation. Yes.
After the Trump guilty verdict in Manhattan, some of your Republican colleagues are throwing around terms like kangaroo court, weaponization of justice. Do you have any concerns about what things will look like after the election and whether people will accept the results of the election?
Look, it was the jury has spoken in a process that jurors use throughout America, and Donald Trump has proven to be a felon, a convicted felon. Yes.
Is there any update on when the Senate might vote on Senator Whitehouse's Supreme Court ethics bill?
I'm talking to, look, first, Justice Roberts has been, in my opinion, not lived up to his responsibilities as Chief Justice. On issue after issue, he's supposed to be the guardian of the court's fairness and opinion. But on something near and dear to me, which is forum shopping, on ethics, on recusal, so Senator Durbin and I in the Judiciary Committee are discussing the best ways to move forward. Yes.
Are you going to try to meet with Speaker Johnson to try to negotiate some type of deal on border legislation?
Look, as I said, the Republicans turned down bipartisan border legislation that they had already agreed to. They ought to change their minds and support our bill. If not, President Biden has moved forward because he prefers legislation, we prefer legislation. The Republicans are blocking it, and so Biden is moving forward. Yes. Look, I support the tax cut bill. It has a lot of good things in it. But right now, Senator Crapo and a lot of the Republicans are opposing it. We hope they'll change their minds.
Senator Schumer,
Thank you, everybody.
Netanyahu, why did you come around to inviting him?